Hello again, everyone. It is my honor to introduce our guest speaker today, Mr. Darren Morrow. Darren has been a technology leader for over 38 years. Very, very impressive. He currently serves as Vice President of Technology Transformation at Honey Baked Ham Corporation. Mr. Morrow retired from AT&T as the CIO of Cricket Wireless, where he led the development, delivery of IT operations for the fastest growing wireless carrier in the US, supporting more than 4,800 stores and 10 million customers. Mr. Morrow was awarded both the AT&T Technology Development President's Award and AT&T CIO Award during his career at AT&T. Mr. Morrow is inventor of 19 US patents with AT&T. And beyond AT&T, he is also a veteran and retired Air Force Reserve Lieutenant Colonel. So it is my great pleasure to invite Mr. Morrow to talk about his days of life as a CIO and also his career development. So without further ado, Darren, you want to take it over?
Yeah, can everybody hear me? Because making sure
yes,
we're good. And then I'll bring up the slides here in a minute. But thank you, everybody, for joining. I appreciate Dr. Lee inviting me to do this. I think it's pretty interesting and challenging for everybody to see how, somebody before your time kind of works their way through this business, and this information technology, in essence, is a business for sure, and how important it is. And as time goes forward, right, even more and more companies are realizing, their not only dependence, but their need for IT to enable their business, right? Not just be something. I grew up in a couple of decades where IT was a kind of a necessary evil, but now it's viewed, at least in my recent history, it's viewed as an enabler and part of the business. It's not something that's kind of beneath the business. So we're going to talk about some of those things and some of the different skills you might need, or if you really want to be a CIO, because that'll be part of the conversation, is what do you think that role is? And then I'll tell you what I perceived it as, and what I had to do to work through that day to day. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do that. And we'll leave a lot of time for questions because I'm very interactive. I'd rather you get some information, digest, and then come back and ask questions from your perspective and your experience today. All right, I'm gonna toss this up. Is that visible?
Yes. If you have questions, cannot wait until question and answer session, you can just raise your hand or just type in the chat box. I will be monitoring the chat box.
Yeah, definitely. And please do, because like I said, I'm very interactive and I enjoy that. So anyway, I've only got, I'm a short, succinct person. Maybe that's the CIO in me or the IT exec, but I've only got 3 slides. I even put the agenda on the title slide just so we didn't have to skip that slide. And but I want to tell you kind of what a day in the life of a CIO is or was, and I'll start there. But I put a picture on here. I borrowed a picture and then modified it a little bit. But what the heck does a CIO do, right? And again, this is my experience and my best information, because that may change depending on the size of the company. So at AT&T or Cricket Wireless is, I would call that a rather large, medium-sized company.
Darren, sorry for the disruption. So
okay.
Have you moved the slides? You're talking about a picture, but we do not see a picture.
Oh, or am I not?
You probably want to move the slides. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Make sure we can see that. So
yeah.
Why don't we do it this way? See if it comes up.
Yes.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So sorry about that. So again, my career as a CIO, or my career in IT, and three things. We'll talk about a day in a life, skills, and then how I got there. So I took this picture, I modified it. If you think about the CIO and a day in the life, and again, it can change, but not dramatically. It's going to differ based on the size of the company. I was the CIO at Cricket Wireless. It was a rather, I'll say a large, medium, but not large or extra large, but it means it. But let me give you some definition to what my day was like and the size of the company. So Cricket Wireless, even just 2 years ago when I retired, was a $5 billion company. Not small, for sure. $5 billion in revenue, and 10, 11 million customers that you're responsible for making sure billing is correct, right? What we call the MRC, monthly recurring charge, things like that. So in that vein, you're trying to figure out every day you go to work, what do you do, right? And it depends on the day, but there are some kind of specific things, right? As a CIO, I'm working with my peers, right? So there's a CFO, a financial lead. There could be what people call a COO, a chief operating officer. It's usually more your sales person or your marketing person, depends on how the organization is organized. There's no perfect organization out there, by the way. But if you think about sales, marketing, finance, customer support, e-commerce, so anything you can think of at a medium-sized business, and if you go to www.cricketwireless.com, you can see the website, and you can kind of get a feel for everything, supply chain as well, because that's how you get devices, places, and into stores and all that good stuff. But my job as the CIO was really to work with the CEO and my peers a lot of times on what does it take to keep the business running, right? Both now and in the future. So a lot of my work every day was, first of all, organizing my day. So as a CIO, I was out there, probably early, probably 6:30, 7 a.m. in the morning, probably trying to get a couple, or at least an hour or two, kind of to myself to get organized and really plan out sort of my daily activities, as well as just some thinking time. Never underestimate the time it takes to think. But a lot of times I'm working on the day-to-day business with my peers, and then my teams, or I'm working on strategy. Strategy meaning I'm working with the business on strategy because they know they can't implement strategy without me, as I've got all the systems. I understand all the systems and all that, and I understand its limitations and where we can do things quickly, or what might take a large amount of time and what may not. I'm also working with my team. So I'm working with, I will call it metrics, data, and then influencing, right? One of the things you start to learn when you kind of work through the business, I think I'm echoing a little bit from somebody, but so if you can go on mute if you're not, but it's easy to say, hey, the CIO's in charge and he's going to dictate. And I won't say there aren't moments that I may have done that, but by the far and large, it's not how you run a team. It's really about data sets and understanding kind of what you're doing and showing, the positives and the negatives of what the teams are doing. And that helps them almost self-correct, right? So you're holding people accountable, but you're not having to dictate all the time. And then you're influencing, right? Part of the leadership techniques that you have is you want to convince people, influence people into how they behave, how they think, and really where we're going from a technology reason. So there are lots of things inside that, right? There are finances you have to understand. One of the things about finances is a dollar is not a dollar. It all depends on what we call capital planning, or OPEX and CAPEX. What's expense, what's capital, and those are accounting principles. So if you don't have an accounting background, you're going to need one, because you're going to have to understand accounting terms and how that works. Because I'll just give you a clue, expense dollars are spent and they hit the bottom line of the business, what they call EBITDA, EBITDA. Learn that word. CEO uses it all day long. But a capital spent or spend is going to be depreciated over time. So it has a different impact to the bottom line. And you usually get a mix of dollars when you're managing budgets and things like that. So those are the kinds of things you have to really think through is what am I running and what am I doing? So if program management has to be part of your day, what programs are we running? What projects are we running? What are we doing? Are we on target? How do we know we're on target? Learning to ask the right questions, because people may believe they're green, if you want to go to that level, or yellow or whatever, but are they really? You gotta kind of have to kind of challenge a little bit of everything, and you're always constantly thinking about iron sharpens iron in what you're doing with your teams. The same way about delivery. How are things progressing from a software development, if you've got development teams or operational teams, and then testing, right? Larger systems, agile is a wonderful thing, but agile is very difficult in large systems and integrated systems. So I always try to convince my team and my vendors, agile is more of a mindset than a methodology. That's a Darren term, because anything large, agile only gets you so far. And then you'll hear terms like scaled, agile, and they brought in those terms because people started to realize that agile doesn't really work in a large scale. And I'll just give you some numbers to play with. In the systems and in the environments I worked with in the past probably 10, 20 years, you're talking even at Cricket Wireless, there's 65, 70 systems and applications in the end-to-end flow. So you're responsible for multiple teams that have 60 to 65 applications or 70 applications all talking to each other at some level through APIs, whether it be whether it's web services, all those good things, whether we're doing cloud development, we did some of that. There are lots of ways. So just realize those are the types of systems, and the other ones previous to that I did were 100 to 125 applications talking to each other. So you can imagine when you're running a CIO role, depending on the size of the company, you have a very large kind of end-to-end architecture, both software and hardware. And again, just to give you an idea of those 65 applications, there were probably almost 34 different data centers involved. Some very small, if you call Google Web Services one of them, but again, you're running across the country, multiple data centers that are connected and multiple services, applications that are connected. And that's where you have to kind of get really good. And I'm going to talk about some skills here in a minute. But the other part of my job was vendors, service level agreements. So I had a mix of on-site or what we call internal programmers and team members. We had some staff augmentation. We may go get contractors that work directly for us. And in some systems, we're purely third party. So such as billing, right? We bought a third party biller. We hosted in their data center. We used their development staff to maintain that. So you have to really become good at SLAs, contract negotiations, and managing, I'll call them vendors or outsourced properties. So all of that on the left and the picture on the right, I've talked about some of that, but you're also got to work with HR, right? You're going to have HR issues, both good and bad, right? How you promote people, there are rules. It's just not if you want to, I promise you. And then, how do you plan for the future? Technology roadmaps, those kinds of things, right? Security, right? Security reviews. I've inherited as a CIO, a failed security audit. So I'm walking in and, everybody's really not happy, and turning that thing around into not only a success, but an excellence in a year or so. Big learning job, but you got to be able to do security as well. And then, training and all those other things. So lots of things going on. And I think the biggest thing that I can say that you've got to be good, and I've chopped off my word there, but removing the roadblocks, real or perceived, right? You know, I have lots of sayings, you know, maybe you get that way after, you know, 30, 35 years, but, you know, you got to go from we can't, and it's got to become how can we? And I had to learn this over time. I'm an IT architect. I'm a software engineer, very trained, Air Force, do it exactly right. And I learned in the business that perfection can be the enemy of good. And a lot of IT folks, unfortunately, who are perfectionists, which most of us are to an extent, really that can get in the way as well. So anyway, but I don't. And it is probably packed with meetings every day, which is why you, I guess, come in early and leave late a lot of days, trying to get some time to yourself and try to think through things. So, but I put a little tagline up there. Basically, you're constantly assessing where we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. And I threw another one of my little cliches. I'll throw a couple out there. You got to plan for success and failure. If you're only planning for success, you will fail. Nothing goes right. Nothing goes perfect. Know what your failure points are. A lot of folks will call that risk mitigation. All those good terms, those are great terms, but plan for failure. One of the biggest cliches we coined at AT&T, a few of the leaders, including myself, was hope is not a plan. So if people say, I hope to get done by next week, then you know they don't have a plan to get done by next week. Hope is never a plan. So if you take a few cliches, maybe you'll figure out what a CIO does. But you could take that one to bank. Hope is not a plan. If you're hoping for something, it's not going to work. So what does it take to be a CIO? I just talked about a bunch of jobs that you have. There's many of them. And I wanted to kind of capture on this slide sort of, well, what does it take? What skill is really needed? And I tried to put them in technical because these will be things that you may think of, and then the other, which you may not think of, at least today and where you are in your career. The first thing is you got to be a problem solver. Call it critical thinking, but you got to be able to problem solve, do analysis, leverage data, a little bit of instinct and all those good things, but you've got to be a critical thinker. You've got to help solve problems, not see roadblocks, as I said on the first slide. You've got to be good at everything. I hate to say this, like if software, hardware, operations, network performance, you've got to be really good at all of it to be successful, because not that you're doing that job every day and you don't have to be an expert at any of it to an extent, but you know, you have to be good at everything or pretty good at everything because you're running everything. So if I don't understand how infrastructure and data centers work from an operations standpoint, I'm not going to be able to help my operations lead. I'm not going to be able to give them advice. I'm not going to be able to bounce things off of them. You've got to have intelligence in many areas. I threw out the word end-to-end architecture, integration on the slide there for system engineering. We'll talk about it. Be a person of options. Remember, I said perfection can get in the way of good. You got to think of ways to be out of the box, challenge, things like that. Understand programs and not just software delivery. How does an application become real to a customer, right? For those of you who want to get into web design and the real effects, and you can go to cricketwireless.com or attwireless.com or honeybake.com, whatever you want to go to. How do you make those things real that people will actually use them, and how do you make them useful? A lot of times you're not really thinking like the customer thinks and all that other stuff. So, but you got to be good at requirements, dev, test, deployment, operations. And I threw the word in deployment because deployment is difficult. When you do CRMs and you do that for large companies, let's pick, I did the DTV ATT merger. I led all that effort. And, you know, you're talking about thousands of call center reps having to learn new tools. how do you deploy that? You know, you're working with the business. How do you do training? You know, timelines for training. So I'll just be honest with you. You know, development sounds really cool, but at AT&T, we really watched the numbers and the days, and in most of our large system delivery, 10% of the time was really in development, believe it or not. It was all about requirements, design, testing, deployment, and those kinds of things. So just so you know that development's important, but it's just one piece of making things real. So understand that. The other thing I threw in here from a technical is understand real dependencies versus false dependencies. A lot of times people like to put things together or create dependencies that don't really exist. They're not true. It's just they haven't experienced something or they didn't know something, all that stuff. So to sum that up, the picture on the right, systems engineering, you see again, risk management, requirements, human factors, software development, project leadership, integration, huge. A lot of my background is in integration, being that integration architect. V&V, that's kind of QA, verification and validation, and then hardware. So those are all technical skills you need to have. What are the other skills you need to have? You better understand the business. There is no way I could have helped the CEO get Cricut to 10 million, 11 million customers without understanding how we run the business, right? How do stores operate? How does customer service work, right? All those good things. The way you learn that is you go to stores, you go to call centers, you watch what people do for a living and what's good and bad. And you'll be surprised how many good IT systems you think you've built till you see people use them and you go, well, that's just crazy. That's hard. You know what I mean? Because you just don't do their job, but you got to get out there, understand how money works, what makes your business tick, whether it was AT&T, DirecTV, you know, whether it was Cricut, whether it's Honeybake, got to learn the business. Listening, right? I'm sure you hear this a lot, but you got to listen to what is said and what is not said. So learn to listen to what people aren't saying, because you'll hear a lot of people talk and you'll hear a lot of people not talk. And it's the people who aren't talking you might want to ask the question of, because it's what they're not saying that may be the most important thing you need to hear. So be careful about just the feedback you're getting. Don't just react to the feedback. Go figure out what's really going on, right? And go figure out what people aren't telling you, so to speak. Leadership and vision. You got to know where to take the business, right? No one's going to tell you how to do your job as a CIO. You have a boss called a CEO, but he doesn't know how to do your job. That's why you got hired, right? He's hiring you because he don't know how to do this. He's assuming you know how to do this job. So you better figure out how to lead and have vision and know where to take the business, right? How do you tell the CEO, you don't want to go there? I'll tell you why, yada, 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 right? Financials and capital planning, we talked about that, expense and capitalization. Capital planning is one of the terms for that, but understanding that, I already talked about vendor management and contract negotiation. How do you learn that? One of the things I did was I tried to learn from people, right? I didn't try to stay in my technical hat too long and only in my technical hat. I tried to learn from other people and what they had to do. And there's some smart people out there. Communication, right? Detailed, succinct. I feel like my slides are messed up there, so hold on. Nope, it's not going to work. All right, we'll keep going. Should have sent that to back. But communication is a hard one because you've got to be detailed. And as a technologist, you probably are. But you don't need all the details. They don't want to understand what you know about technology, but it has to be detailed enough for them to comprehend. So making the complex simple is a very, very important skill as you move up the chain. Knowing what to tell them and what's noise, right? So that's what I mean. Succinct, right? So I've got those two words there, and you should be scratching your head. It's got to be detailed yet succinct. It's got to be clear, concise. We have a term called bluff, bottom line up front, right? Get to the point. I'll tell you a little side story, and I mean, this is kind of what I do is I can tell you my experience, right? I've been in meetings at AT&T, executive floors, with CFOs, and we're doing this business case. We're going to save $65 million a year, and I know that sounds like a lot of money, but the CFO goes, you put the bottom line up front. And I said, hey, first 5 minutes, can I tell you we're going to save $65 million, right? And he's like, you got 5 minutes. I mean, that's what I mean by get to the point. They don't have time. Those folks are very busy. They're running massive companies. So get to the point and be decision oriented. Don't tell a story that has no action, right? If you're not telling them something that requires action, whether you're taking it or they need to take it, you're missing the point. And the check got overwritten by the picture. I'm sorry about that, but it says check your numbers. If you're going with slides and your numbers don't match, they will eat you alive, and they will lose all confidence in you. So if you have numbers on a slide, make sure the rows and the columns all add up, because they're doing the math in their head very rapidly. Okay, so just some hints. So communications and presentation skills, very important as you move up. Collaboration and negotiation. I've taught Honey Bake this one. When I came in, I'm like, it's not no, but it is how and when, right? The business doesn't like to work with IT because we're a bunch of no-sayers or naysayers. And I always say it's not no, but it is how and when. And you really got to learn to collaborate with your business partners and negotiate delivery, right? Because you're going to get people standing on your desk, and maybe not literally, but figuratively, and punching their fist. And again, not ugly, but firm, at wanting something delivered in a week, and you know darn well that's too risky, and you have to explain to them why it's so risky and why it's going to take 2 weeks or whatever it's going to take. So, and I'll go back to learn to remove roadblocks. People will create roadblocks. People will perceive roadblocks, right? When people tell me why we can't do something, I turn around and say, what are the limiting factors that make you think that or make you believe that? And then I do what if. Well, what if that one was eliminated? Could we move on? Because you may not have the power to remove a roadblock, but as a CIO or even the CEO, it can be removed, right? So just realize that, okay? All right, so those are just some of the skills. There's probably 1,000 things I left off, but tried to hit them hard. Okay, so my career, how did I get there? I wish I could say when I started in this business a long time ago, I thought I would be a CIO. Actually, I never thought I'd be a CIO. I never even wanted to be a CIO when I started in this business. So I'm an Air Force guy. My dad was an Air Force guy. My sons are Air Force guys. So I started in the Air Force. I started at what we call NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command, or I guess it's the Space Force now. We called it Headquarters Space Command back in those days. I started in computer operations. I didn't even start in development. So 24/7 operations, operating systems, old mainframes, stuff you probably would never need to know, octal systems, right? We could do all kinds of crazy things. But then I went and on an Air Force scholarship. I finished my degree, became an officer, a software engineer. I then taught. I was a master instructor. So I taught, designs and programming and software engineering, SDLCs, again, operations, because that was my background. So I taught comm and computer operations, those kinds of things. So I've got that in my background. And then other things I did in the reserves as well was I was a commander. So yeah, that kind of got me in the leadership concept. I've been a program manager of what we call electronic warfare databases. I did a lot of technical intelligence and research on, I will say, technologies that the Air Force needed to do. A lot of that, you can imagine, is, top secret and all that good stuff, but it was technical intelligence. And I wrote a lot of code, believe it or not, as a reservist, because there were some things that I knew from my civilian side that could help them. So I did a little bit of everything in the Air Force. And even did a staff job, worked for the CIO of what's called the Defense Intelligence Agency out of Bowling Air Force Base in DC. So did a lot of that. From a civilian side, I once I got out of the Air Force, I was a software developer and a team lead. And Ada, which, only if you're at Lockheed or Boeing are you ever going to see Ada. But I did C, C++. I did a little bit of Lisp. We did a little bit of everything. I learned how to do requests for proposals as a contractor. So that's, you start to learn skills like that. And I did learn a lot about integration. Again, one thing about Department of Defense systems and even the big systems at AT&T, many applications highly integrated, right? Performance problems, interface problems, those kinds of things. You really get your hands dirty. When I got to AT&T or Bell South, I was a team lead. Then I became a director. I turned down the director job at first. A couple of years later, they sort of made me take it. So whatever that means. But I just kept getting larger teams, larger systems, and did all kinds of things. So I started in C++ and Java. When Java first started, I was part of the .com era back in the 99, 2000 era. We did some of the first web programming ever and web development. Again, more integration. Then I got bigger roles at Bell South and did compensation systems and CRM systems and sales systems and ordering systems and yada, yada, yada. Because like I said, some of these systems have 100 applications in them. And I became really good at highly complex and highly performing systems, right? Because when you've got 4 or 5 integration systems supporting a call center, you better know none of it can take more than 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds. And by the way, every wide area network call you make is going to cost you 40 milliseconds at least, if more, not more, especially back then. So lots to do. When you start deploying large systems, all of a sudden you're talking to infrastructure folks and you're learning from them. You're learning how operations works, and of course security, right? Started to become a bigger and bigger part of what I started playing with, because again, personal information, sensitive personal information, all those good things, credit cards, whatever. Social security numbers and old systems, you just kind of get your head wrapped around some of these things that are out there. And then all of that led to, we ended up creating a startup in AT&T called AO Wireless, which became Cricket Wireless. And we built that from the ground up in 10 months. So you think about what you learn, right? We're negotiating contracts. We're getting vendors. Those were some long days, I promise you. And then I went and did strategic roadmaps for larger AT&T down headquarters in Dallas, technical roadmaps, converging billing systems, application retirements, all kinds of things. And then I did merger and acquisition as well, Cricket and AO, DirecTV and AT&T. And then I became the CIO. So like I said, I didn't really intend to become a CIO. I don't know. I learned a bunch and couldn't keep my mouth shut, I guess was the bottom line of that. But you have to become political savvy in not keeping your mouth shut, by the way. So the other thing I do coach people about AT&T, very large corporation. And I used kind of my term, do not get pigeonholed. A lot of folks become very good at one thing, and those people did the same thing for 15, 20 years at AT&T. But eventually that thing gets retired, which was one of my jobs, let's retire systems. And then people didn't have other jobs or skills to go to because they were really good at one thing. So if you want to be a CIO, you can't be really good at one thing. You got to be pretty good at a bunch of things. If I'm just throwing that out there. So, and then I retired from AT&T a lot of years. I'll be honest with you, I probably worked 60, 70, 80 hours a week for 20 years, just the way it was. And when you get into these higher level positions, we had pagers, and then we had, Blackberries, and then we had phones. But you're pretty much available, I'll be honest with you, in those kinds of roles all time. So I've been, I'll just be honest with you, right? There's been times, weekends, nights, you're sort of available. So there's a price to be paid at all levels. So just realize that. At Honey Baked, after I retired, I took a few months off, did some consulting. one of my former bosses at AT&T, the CIO of AT&T, when I was right before I was the CIO at Cricket, I was on the board at Honey Baked, and so she asked me to come over, and I do a technology transformation. Actually, I'm doing business transformation as well, building roadmaps, establishing a program management function for them, really working through their financials on technology spend, and security is a big part of what I've been doing at Honey Baked as well. Technical assessments, security audits, lived through some crazy security things, but we're implementing a ton of stuff there. And then because I wasn't busy enough, I also taught at Troy University for a little bit, and I've been teaching at Kennesaw State part-time for the last couple of years. So there's not a magic formula to become a CIO. I just kind of wanted to give you my journey so you'd realize how diverse it had become over the years, both from a technical perspective and sort of the businesses, right? At AT&T, I did DSL, wireline, wireless, video, broadband. I mean, I touched all the products as well and all the systems. So depth and breadth is an Air Force term we use, right? You got to be good, got to have some depth to you, but you got to be very broad at the same time. So that's sort of my story. And if you ever take some of my classes, trust me, I can tell you some funny stories about real life IT, and especially in security. Those are even more fun to talk about, but anywhere and everywhere. So, all right, that's kind of my story and my spill. I'm going to drop the slides, and we'll let you guys ask some questions.
Thank you so much, Darren.
Sure.
Oh, there's some echoing. Yeah, your presentation is very insightful and entertaining. You keep me engaged all the time. So let's just open up for questions. I think there's 2 questions in the chat box. Let's go with them first. Can you see the chat box? If you can, I can read it to you.
I can read it. I've got one that says, how do you keep up with trends in IT and IT leadership?
That's the third. Actually, if you can go up a little bit, I think there's 2 more questions. The first one is from Matthew.
Let me go find it.
So basically, Matthew's question, he earned a BSIT degree in Kennesaw. Right now, he's pursuing MD. He's asking, is this good enough from education background to be a CIO in the future?
I think from an education perspective, absolutely, right? The MBA will actually help you with the financial side of the game. I don't have an MBA. I have a master's in computer science. I did it while I was in the Air Force. So it didn't hurt me, but an MBA does help at that level. People like to see that. I just had the opportunity at AT&T to work, so people knew I had those skills. They'd seen it. But the MBA can't hurt you by any means if you want to be kind of in IT leadership. It's a good vision. So you probably got some ideas about how proposals work, how finance and accounting kind of really work in a business environment. Return on investment's a huge conversation, right, at that level. But again, the color of money, a lot of folks never understand that expense, CapEx versus OpEx, and how important that is in the conversation, because you can't mix the dollars. I'll give you an idea. Cricket, I had $100 million budget. So, it's just math, guys. Don't let it fool you. Don't let it scare you. It's just numbers. But, you had to understand how much is expense, how much is capital, and what am I spending on. So education-wise, you're fine. It's great, right? You got a technical degree, you got an MBA. Education won't be your issue. It'll be what jobs do you take, right? What do you show that depth and breadth across? So absolutely.
Thank you, Darren. I know the session is supposed to end at 7:45. Do you have some time to stick around a little bit?
Absolutely. Sorry, probably went a little long.
Okay.
So I'll read the next one. Let's see. Currently rising sophomore at KSU. Undecided on major. Pick a major. I'm considering the IT route. What got you into the field of IT? Wow. The Air Force got me in the field of IT. I was sort of like you. I didn't know where I was going to go. And when I entered the Air Force, they give you this test. And then some of you guys may have taken an ASVAB test. I haven't changed the name of that in 40 years, I'm sure. But they were the ones who said, hey, you have they give you all these logical diagrams, and I call it almost like, can you do, I'm going to pick on math. Calculus is nothing more than pattern matching and problem solving. I hate to boil it down to that, but they give you all of these diagrams that help you feel like you can work through logic and all those kinds of things. So they're the ones who said, hey, we want you to go into computers. And of course, 38 years ago, a long time ago, who knew what that meant, but IT is a good career field. Software engineering is a good career. Anything's a good career field. I've had some great programmers who were math majors or even music majors because, again, rhythm, patterns, and just that logic training is what people are looking for. Yeah, go for it. Okay. The last one, Tyler, right now, at least, how do you keep up with trends in IT and IT leadership? Yes. Podcasts, yes. News sites, magazines, conferences, people. You know what I mean? People. Don't be afraid to learn. One of the things I had to coach people on is don't be afraid to learn from people you don't like or don't respect. You're going to run into a bunch of people and you're going to go, man, I don't know if I like that person. But you know what? Just because you don't like them or respect them that much doesn't mean they're not good at something. So I learned a lot from people. Pick people out up above you, peers, even below you. What skills do they have that you don't have or you need to get better at, and watch them, right? I spent a lot of time learning technology from other people because I didn't always have time to go to a conference. But if somebody else did, I made an effort to go, hey, can you give me the material? Can you talk about what you learned? So don't forget people. Podcasts are great, which is more people, but don't forget people are learning things all the time. I'm always learning stuff from students, by the way. I don't, maybe shouldn't admit that to Dr. Lee, but some of them have more time to play than I do. So I'll ask them, like, did you go look at this? And what did you find out? Because then I can adapt and get and kind of absorb that knowledge. So all of those things are great, but don't forget people. And the hardest thing I had to learn was learn from people I didn't really like, because sometimes you turn yourself off, but I'm like, it doesn't mean they don't have something to teach you or you can't learn from them. So hopefully that was helpful. But yeah, all of those things are great. And it's hard, trust me. This business is moving faster and faster. Goes quick.
Yes, exactly. More questions for Darren?
Any more questions? You can ask anything.
Okay. All right. How does the leadership style change in less technical leadership role comparing to more technical role?
That is a great question. And Tyler, I had to learn this. Sometimes I'm a big techie, I'm a software engineer, IT guy, very technical, very, very logical, very, I hate to say it, almost ones and zeros, right? That's my mindset. I really have to adapt my leadership style to non-technical folks because they don't think the way you think, right? And as a technical guy, you always think everybody should think like you think because we're logical. But that's not always true, right? People come from varied backgrounds and varied cultures. So really adapt yourself and learn people, right? So you have to spend more time. Sometimes you'll naturally gravitate to people who think like you, operate like you, have the same culture. And I'll be honest with you, I had to really learn to sit and talk to people who come from different backgrounds, who think differently. And some of the brightest things that I got credit for was somebody that, techies might dismiss because they didn't know better than to say it, right? So really learn people, and you do have to adapt your style. Don't treat everybody like, they're technical and they understand ones and zeros. You really have to spend more time. We used to use this term at AT&T called red time. Sorry, we use colors and all these things when we start talking about leadership. But red time, right? What are people doing? What did they do on vacation? Where did they grow up? What did that mean, right? How do they look at the world? How do they look at problem solving differently because they have a different background or culture? You really have to kind of go out there and spend some time with folks, whether it's, the Far East, the India kind of area, Israel, everything is so different. And I learned so much by just spending time with people and really kind of picking their brains and learning who they were and how they thought. But yeah, and especially non-techies, you really got to go learn the people. And it's a lot less about logic and it's more about relationship, I guess. It really depends on the person, but if you're trying to delineate technical and non-technical, it's more relational than anything when it comes to that. Just because I admit it, I love ones and zeros, right? It should all be very clear. Why can't we just figure this out? But it's fascinating. So that was a great question, Tyler. As you get up, just pay attention to maybe more red time, more personal time, and not so much logic in your decision making, right? And those kinds of things.
So next up, we have Matthew.
Okay.
You can unmute yourself.
Sure. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, thanks. So first, Darren, I just wanted to say thanks just for taking this time to talk with us. So my question is, as a CIO, you have to juggle a lot of different things, both technical and kind of people-oriented. So I'm curious, from your experience, have you ever had to deal with a really difficult decision as a CIO? And how did you mitigate, or how did you go through, managing that difficult decision, combining both people and technical priorities?
I think it inevitably, right, as a CIO, you got difficult problems, right? You're going to have people that you may have to let go in events, right, or whatever, right? You also sometimes you have layoffs, right, that are inevitable, right? You grow as a company, you stall as a company, and all those things. But I think what you have to do is evaluate people as a whole person. What do they bring to the team? What's their value as a whole person, right? Because sometimes the most technical person, who's, I will just say, a sour grape, is of no help, right? They've offended everybody so badly that their value it's tarnished and nobody really wants to listen to them anymore. So you can't just rely on who's the smartest or brightest or most technical. You got to really rely on what does the whole person concept bring? What is it, diversity and all those other things come into play, because you need that kind of diverse cultural space to really get the best product. And sometimes you got to really make some tough decisions. But I think you have to be very logical and real about it too, right? What's their skills? What's their technical skills? What's their people skills? What's their team skills? And I hate, nobody likes this, but you do have to put sort of a numeric value to that in your head and go for it. But yeah, I mean, I had to learn that some hard ways. I mean, Matthew, I'm a techie, man. It's all ones and zeros, right? I want the biggest and the brightest, but I realize the biggest and the brightest sometimes are not the best team players. And you have to really be careful with that of what's the total value of that person to the larger team, right? And I've had to move people across teams to get the maximum value out of somebody, this person's not performing well on this team. Let me give them a shot on a different team. Maybe they're in the wrong role, right? So you kind of work with HR and people like that to say, and then you'd be surprised, man, they blossom. And all of a sudden they're like, wow, we thought they were a C player. They're a B plus, almost an A minus player now, not to put labels on people, but we all are people. We all evaluate things. I'm being real, but I've had to move team players and it worked great. It's like, wow, all of a sudden they're contributing, they're feeling better about themselves. So you got to work through those things. But like I said, you got to take a person on their whole value, not just one skill over the other one. Because they're all important when you build teams. And at Cricket, we had 144 employees. I mean, not small. We probably had 600 to 1,000 vendors out there, right? And some of them were sitting in our building too. So you're working with vendors who are on site with you too. So they're looking at you like you're the boss, their boss too. So you have to be good about that kind of stuff. So that's the best way I can tell you, Matthew. You look at the whole value of the person as to how it contributes to the team. And don't get all the same players. All the same players won't help you.
Got you. Thank you.
You bet. So
thank you, Darren. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Any questions? All right. I guess there's no more questions.
All right.
All right. So thank you so much, Darren, for taking time off your busy schedule to share your experience, your wisdom with our students. I learned a lot. I believe the student also learned a lot. And also you touch all the keywords like service, value, business, person. Actually, all those concepts are taught in IT service delivery class I'm teaching. And that probably give the student actual incentive to spend more time in this class, study the topic.
Good deal. I appreciate that. And you guys now know me on Teams, so if you have questions about anything, I mean anything, I promise you, you can ask me anything.
Yes, actually, I forgot to mention, we are so fortunate to have Darren to start as a senior lecturer for our department starting this August. So I'm very happy that Darren is joining us this fall. And it's going to be very valuable, not only to our department, also to all the students.
Super. All right, looking forward to it.
Yes, with that said, thank you again. And I think we can conclude the session. And the recording will be made available. I will email everyone with the recording. Now, I guess we can do things, go eat or get some relaxation. So good evening, everyone. Bye.
See everybody.
Bye.
Dr. Lee, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just sent you out a mail